Well, hello. I am Pastor Rhonda, founder of Celebrate Life Cancer Ministry, and I welcome you all to our time today to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine and all that is going on and how it can benefit us as people. And so I'm going to turn it over to Miss Olinka, um, who will do our introductions for us.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time out to come and share with us this morning. And we're privileged to have with us um, two specialists that will be able to educate us about COVID, the vaccine, and highlight on points that would help us make decisions on getting the vaccine. So first and foremost, ladies first, we have Dr. Alexa Gaffney. Dr. Alexa Gaffney is a triple board certified infectious disease subspecialist, internist, and pediatrician. She's above and beyond this a mother, a speaker, an author, and a coach. Dr. Alexia invited the world into her life when she was diagnosed with breast cancer at 37 years old. She publicly shared her journey through social media, and she went through a double mastectomy, chemotherapy, and radiation therapy for a breast cancer treatment. Cancer has transformed her life and her worldwide view, and has been healed and in transforming herself and others through her speaking, teaching, and writing. Dr. Alexia also utilizes advocacy via conferences, community engagement, social media to educate the at-risk communities and the general public about lifestyle, disease prevention, and management. Her passion and purpose is to create healing pathways to help others achieve total health and wellness, mind, body, and spirit. Dr. Alexia graduated from Frisk University. She received her doctorate at SUNY Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, and she completed a combined internal medicine and pediatrics residency training program and infectious disease fellowship in June 2011 and 13, respectively. So welcome, Ms. Dr. Alexia, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
And then we also have a gentleman who is very dear to me. This is my brother-in-law, Andrew Mujugira. And briefly, he is a Ugandan clinical epidemiologist and a senior research scientist with 18 years of HIV prevention, clinical trial experience in East and Southern Africa. He's received his medical degree from Makerere University in Uganda and PhD in epidemiology from University of Washington in Seattle. He currently works in Uganda with HIV underserved population and receives research funding from the United States National Institute of Health. Andrew is a head of Infectious Disease Institute in Kasangati, Makerere University, Uganda. He has over 10 years of experience with oral, pre-exposure, prophylaxis, efficiency trials, and demonstration in projects in implementation studies. His current research focuses on developing methods to build self-efficacy and empowerment, increase antiviral adherence, and reduce sexual risk behaviors among key populations in East Africa, combined with HIV prevention tools. Andrew, very welcome. Thank you very much for being with us this morning as well.
Thank you.
And we look forward to hearing and getting so much education from you in regards to COVID and how we can better assist ourselves in making conscious decisions. So our first question would be pretty much what everybody wants to really truly understand, and we'll start with Dr. Alexia. What is COVID-19?
Sure. So COVID-19 is basically the clinical disease syndrome that is caused as a result of becoming infected with SARS coronavirus type 2 or SARS-CoV-2. So SARS-CoV-1 was or SARS-CoV-2, not COVID. COVID is terminology specific to this pandemic, was the avian influenza that we saw in Asia some years ago. SARS-CoV-2 is what we know as COVID-19, which we first saw in China and spread to become a worldwide pandemic. So it is a viral infection that enters the body through the respiratory tract. So nose, mouth, throat, even the eyes, the mucous membranes of the eyes, and causes a number of symptoms. It can cause respiratory illness, and illness can be anything from asymptomatic, meaning someone has no symptoms, but they carry the virus, ranging all the way to pneumonia with respiratory failure or lung failure, so needing support with oxygenation, whether that support is through nasal prongs or nasal cannula to give extra oxygen, a face mask, or mechanical ventilation with breathing tubes being put down, or use of like non-invasive mechanical ventilation like BiPAP. But the infection can also affect other systems in the body. So we've seen people, I'll just go head to toe just to make sure I don't miss any points. So people have experienced central nervous system symptoms, including just brain fog, which is like cognitive dysfunction, not being clear-headed, forgetting words. People have experienced mood disturbances, exacerbations of mental health conditions, insomnia, irritability, all the way up to stroke, which we've seen in some more severe cases of this infection. If we're moving down, we've seen people have sinus symptoms, loss of their sense of smell, loss of their sense of taste. Moving down the respiratory tract, people have had nasal congestion, sore throat, and when the virus really impacts the lungs, you can have varying degrees of respiratory illness. So it could be coughing, chest congestion, shortness of breath, chest tightness. That is typically associated with pneumonia, which is inflammation in the lung tissue itself. People have had lung damage, lung scarring, and acute or like new onset of respiratory failure and damage. And people have been left with, as one of the consequences or sequelae of the infection, chronic respiratory failure. So people needing to be on oxygen for the long term and maybe even for their lifetime in some cases, because there's been so much inflammation and permanent damage to the lung tissue. People have gut symptoms. So people can present with, what we will often call a stomach flu, right? Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain. People, if you move outward from there, people have experienced liver failure, kidney failure as a result of this infection. And then external to the organs, people can experience profound muscle aches, joint pains, back pain, and that can be acute, lasting a short time. Or I have patients who are what we call long haulers, who have chronic symptoms, including pain, nerve damage, or nerve injury, which can present as like numbness, tingling, weakness in the distal parts of the extremity. So this is truly a multi-system infection. Some of the major problems or the acute problems that we see most profoundly impact the respiratory system. And then there is a inflammatory cascade that is set off, that it activates so many of the inflammatory pathways in the body, and that is what's causing people to have these clotting events. So people getting clots, or what we call DVTs, deep vein thromboses, in the lower extremities, and those can break off and travel to the lungs. Those are called pulmonary emboli, blood clots in the lungs, and those can be deadly. That same inflammation can result in clotting in the vessels of the heart, and people have experienced heart attacks. It's the same mechanism for how people end up experiencing a stroke. And then early in the pandemic, you may remember where people were talking about having COVID toes or COVID fingers. That is the same clotting activity, but on a more microscopic or microvascular level. So the very tiny vessels in the tips of our fingers and toes can become clotted off. And it led to this rash phenomenon or purplish discoloration that we know as COVID toes. That is also taking place in the organs on a microscopic level and maybe contributing to some of the organ dysfunction that people have with this infection. So COVID-19 is a clinical syndrome. It can range from a asymptomatic carriage of the virus where you don't have symptoms, but you are infected in the respiratory tract and you can spread the virus, all the way to the far extreme where people need hospitalization and become critically ill and even die from this infection.
Okay, thank you very much for that very informative information. Andrew, would you like to add anything?
Dr. Alex has done a great job in describing the clinical syndrome. I would add 2 points. One is that it's hard to predict how the virus will affect you. I've had people say, well, only 5% of people get severe disease. But this virus is it's not discriminatory. We've seen healthy young people under 30 years old get killed and older people survive. So you cannot say that because few people get severe disease, that therefore we shouldn't be careful. And then the second thing is that even if it's about less than 5% who get severe disease, this is about 10 times worse than the seasonal flu in terms of disease severity. So you've got to take it seriously. I think sometimes people focus on the mountain and forget that at the top of the mountain, things are pretty rough.
Okay, so the next question would be, at what point when you start to experience the symptoms that you have discussed, at what point should one get a healthcare individual involved in the process? Because a lot of times, because this virus is like a flu virus, a lot of people are taking it lightly, where they're staying home and just self-medicating, resting. And a lot of times, as you know, the virus does decapitate one, and therefore we feel rest, sleep, drink your fluids and everything will be fine. But because, this is kind of like a different kind of flu, as everybody would understand it, at what point would you really advise somebody to seek health care? Andrew, if you can add to that.
Right. So I practice in Uganda, so my advice may not be relevant as much to the US population. So I'd ask Dr. Alexa to weigh in on this.
Okay. So it's important to seek medical attention in the appropriate setting for the degree of your symptoms. I think that everybody who has access to healthcare should seek evaluation, because sometimes people feel relatively okay, but the telltale sign of things might get critically worse quickly, and even in the absence of serious symptoms, is what is the oxygen level. So, now we're encouraging people to not just have a thermometer at home so that they can measure their temperature, but to have a pulse oximeter at home. That is the finger probe that you use to measure your oxygen saturations in the blood. A decrease in the oxygen saturations is a significant indicator that someone should seek emergency medical attention, even if they otherwise feel well. So early in the pandemic, when everyone was just showing up to emergency rooms, what many providers were noticing was that people looked pretty good and they didn't have significant symptoms. But if they were what we call hypoxic, they have very low oxygen levels, those people would kind of crash and burn very quickly. They would rapidly progress to respiratory failure and organ failure as a result of these low oxygen levels. So they're advising people who are home, monitoring their symptoms and doing self-care and supportive care to measure their oxygen. And if the oxygen drops to 91 or below, it's a significant indicator to go to the emergency room. I was talking to a friend who's a breast cancer survivor, and she just lost her father-in-law to COVID-19. And when the family was saying goodbye, it was observed that a family member did not look well, although she reported she didn't have many symptoms. Her oxygen level was 71%. She walked into the hospital to say goodbye to her father-in-law, and she thought she was fine, but her oxygen level was 71%. So she was promptly admitted to the hospital because she was in respiratory failure. So we have to keep a close eye on those oxygen levels. We have to keep a close eye on other symptoms, chest pain, palpitations, chest tightness. If you're observing a loved one, are they lethargic? Are they able to get up and take fluids and keep themselves hydrated? Are they able to eat and nourish their bodies? If they're not able to do those things, it may be an indicator that it's time to go to the hospital. At the end of the day, in this talk, we can't cover every possibility. So when in doubt, please do call your primary care provider. If you're not in care of a primary care provider, then you can utilize an urgent care center or an emergency room. But it is very important that we go to the right place based on the symptoms that we're experiencing. We don't want people with very mild symptoms who might be managed better in an urgent care setting or outpatient setting crowding the emergency rooms, because then the people who need access to critical care for COVID and other things get crowded out, and we have more loss and more morbidity and mortality as a result of people not being able to get the care they need in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you for that. So then that will be kind of like a double question with that is then if you are, what can people do at home if they are identified as COVID positive?
So it's important to know who is positive and who isn't, right? Because you don't want to inadvertently expose people who have not yet been infected in the home. Just because one person has it doesn't mean everybody in the house has it. It's still important to practice isolation and social distancing within the home. And, I live just outside of New York City, so we've seen people manage this in one-bedroom apartments. So you want to isolate the person who is sick out and away from the common areas. So, sacrifice a bedroom. If there's not an extra bathroom, you can still share the bathroom, but everyone should continue to wear their mask. You can't even just say that the sick person should wear their mask. Everyone should wear their mask in the home. Common spaces need to be disinfected promptly after use. Food can be delivered or left just outside of a bedroom or a space where the sick person is. They can take the food in. You can use disposable dishes, or if you're using the houseware, wear gloves, take it to the sink, wash it promptly with hot soapy water. That will kill the virus. And just clean, disinfect, wash your hands frequently, avoid touching your face and mouth so that the virus is not spreading in homes. Black and brown communities have been particularly hard hit because we often live in multi-generational households. So you have infants all the way up to, very elderly folks, people going to work, people going to school. And even if you don't feel well, if people are leaving the house, it's still important to mask up so that you don't bring the virus into the home to other vulnerable people.
That's very well said. So what we say in Uganda is avoid men, MEN. Avoid touching your mouth, your eyes, and your nose.
That's a good way to put it. And that catches people's attention, because when you say avoid men, I'm like, where's that going? But that's an excellent acronym. And acronyms are a great way to just recall information quickly.
And people won't forget. Not that one.
No. This pandemic, we need to avoid men. No one will forget that.
So we have one question from Facebook where Daphne is asking about the overcrowding and what happens when you're turned away from a particular hospital.
Yeah, so these are the kinds of decisions that healthcare professionals do not want to have to make. but that will have to be made in situations where there are no beds at the inn. You know, hospitals are running out of beds and they have no place to put people. They don't have the resources to bring everybody into the hospital. And that also extends to decision making for like EMTs, ambulance services, right? So if you call an ambulance, you call EMS, the EMT assesses and decides who's coming to the hospital and who isn't, when we're forced into these kinds of situations. So that becomes a problem for Black and Brown communities again, because we don't always receive equitable care. We face healthcare discrimination. And so someone who doesn't look like us may be faced with deciding, you know, is grandma going to the hospital or not? You know, and it's a very difficult question to answer, but I think the real answer is it's imperative that we do what is being asked of us and what has been asked of us since we knew about this pandemic. And that is to stay home, to isolate, to socially distance, to stay out of bars, restaurants, places of worship, public gyms, the places that have the highest likelihood that, or not the highest likelihood, but are associated with an increased risk of acquiring a COVID-19 infection. In this pandemic, we want to have our cake and eat it too. We want to not wear our masks. We want to be free to live and move about the country. We want to sit in bars and restaurants, and we want healthcare to be available to us if and when we get sick. But these behaviors, the refusal to really make decisions based on the public health aspect of this and not just allowing people to do what they want to do and not making decisions based on economics has led us to this point. The answer is not what happens when I get sick. The answer is to do your absolute best to avoid getting sick. And I think, you know, on a population level, we're just not taking it seriously enough.
Okay, so since we've identified home remedies and home, I would say, what we have to do at home specifically to take care of ourselves, can you give us suggestions on how to conduct ourselves outside of our home? So some of us, yes, as essential workers, some of us do have to really go to work by, you know, by choice of having to really take care of our families. We do have to go to the grocery stores. Most of us, just like myself and, you know, like you and Pastor Rhonda, who have dealt with immune compromised diseases, how is it that we can feel comfortable going outside our homes and maintaining a normal kind of lifestyle with knowing that we can be safe? Because yes, we can be responsible for ourselves, but we don't know if our neighbor is responsible, you know? So a lot of times the conversations that we have are, okay, so when I go outside and do other things, how much does that put us in risk? And what can we do to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well as others?
Okay. Do you want to take that one, Dr. Andrew?
Thank you. So earlier on, I said avoid men, so avoid touching your mouth, your eyes, and your nose. So in Uganda, we also say when you're outside the home, follow women. W, wash your hands. Make sure that you follow good hand hygiene wherever you are, and avoid touching high-touch surfaces, so door handles, railings. Just use your sleeve or your elbows. We, of course, no longer shake hands. Some people don't even like the elbow bump, and avoid hugging. So W is wash your hands. M, masks, face masks. So wearing face masks, if all of us wore face masks, a face mask is a double-edged sword in the sense that it prevents droplets from, if you're infected, from leaving the infected person. And it also blocks your contact with droplets from the outside. So if you have the disease, it keeps it in, and if you don't have the disease, it keeps it out. And if you can wear face masks all the time, we shall certainly reduce transmission or spread of this SARS-CoV-2 virus that Alexa talked about. So M, masks. E is exercise. So physical activity is very important, both for physical or cardiovascular health as well as our mental health. One of the challenges of COVID is that it has kept us indoors, zoomed up and zoomed out, and we need to get outside and breathe some fresh air, stretch your legs, clear your head, watch the birds sing if you have a forest near you, and get some physical activity. And then lastly, N, which is nutrition, is make sure that we eat well. Unfortunately, COVID has kept us stressed indoors. We are stress eating, we are comfort eating, and we're getting pandemic pounds added to our bodies. And those pandemic pounds are very difficult to shed. So make sure that you're eating right, you're eating healthy. I like following the simple 7-word advice for nutrition. Eat food, not a lot, mostly plants. Eat food, not a lot, mostly plants. So in summary, avoid men, follow women, and eat healthy.
Amen to that. Thank you very much, Andrew. That was really well said.
We're going to have to get that typed in a chat box or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to quote you on that one. That is definitely going on my social media pages because it's such a succinct way of saying exactly what we need to do. And I'm like, I've been saying this, but I've never said it so succinctly. And I love that. Thank you for presenting it that way. Simple, clear, to the point. Excellent advice.
Thank you.
So tell me again, avoid men, follow women, and...
So the women, the N in women is nutrition. And the advice is simple. It's eat food, not a lot, mostly plants. It's just 7 words. So avoid food that is processed. If you can, eat natural food that comes out of the ground where you can. Eat green leafy vegetables and eat fruit. I personally found that if I stop eating after 7 p.m., I don't add weight, so I don't eat after sunset. I also find that if I stop snacking on carbs in the middle of the day after breakfast and instead I eat fruit instead of cookies, that I feel better and I feel healthier. And so we have all these comorbidities, diabetes, obesity, hypertension, arthritis. We are what we eat. And so if you put junk in, I don't think I need to say anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we've covered really the understanding of COVID, our responsibilities in taking care of ourselves and others, understanding of what it is and what kind of virus it is. So as we all know now, the topic at hand is the vaccine. And a lot of people are apprehensive, have their own views as to why and why they should take it, why they shouldn't. So I really would like to allow you both to help us understand, number one, what is a vaccine? And then what is the COVID vaccine and what does it do for us?
Okay. You want to start, Dr. Andrew?
The history of vaccination is fascinating. So in 1796, a Christian doctor in England called Edward Jenner found that if he inoculated a young boy with extract from a smallpox or cowpox lesion, that he was able to protect the young boy from getting cowpox. So the first vaccine was developed in the 18th century, and that was 1796. So the Spanish Empire, as you know, the Spaniards had colonized South America, and they decided that rather than to protect the indigenous populations from getting smallpox, because as you know, the history of North and South America, the smallpox wiped out the indigenous populations, that they would vaccinate the people. And so they sent vaccination crews to Peru And some of the mothers, when they heard that the vaccinators were coming, they ran up the mountain saying, "This is the Antichrist who has come to wipe us out." This was 1803. In 2021, we still have people saying vaccines are associated with 666 and the Antichrist, 217 years after the smallpox vaccine was introduced to Peru. There's nothing new under the sun. Vaccines are one of the most effective public health tools. We know that in 1980, smallpox was eradicated from the world, and this would never have happened if we hadn't done a mass vaccination. So in public health, probably after the discovery of clean water, vaccines have had the largest effect on wiping out diseases that killed and maimed children. When I was training many years ago, we used to routinely treat children with measles who had pneumonia of infection in the lungs or infection in the brain, which you call encephalitis, or just diarrhea. And I can't tell you, I still remember 30 years later, all those death certificates I had to write to those mothers who had not vaccinated their children, and have to look a mother in the eye and say your child has died of a disease that could have been prevented if they had been vaccinated. If you walk over Africa, you see people who are crippled by polio. The problem was that vaccines became so successful that for their own good. So they wiped out all the diseases in the developed north. And so when anti-vaxxers came up and started saying, we don't need vaccination, it's because the whole generation had grown up without seeing these diseases. But we in the developing world know because we saw them with our own eyes. And so when people stopped vaccinating, then these diseases started coming back. I think you had outbreaks in New York a couple of years ago of measles, and in California as well, where there's pockets of anti-vaxxers. So briefly, that's a history of vaccines. They're very effective tools. I'll hand over Dr. Alex, and then I'll wrap up at the end.
Sure. So when we are vaccinating individuals or a population against a particular infection, and this is in general, we are exposing them either to the infectious organism. So if you think about flu, like we give inactivated flu viruses, same thing is true for varicella or chickenpox vaccines. We give an inactivated virus, measles, mumps, rubella, inactivated viral vaccines, right? So we're exposing to either the pathogen or some protein, which we refer to as antigens, on the structure of the infectious agent. We vaccinate you by exposing you to some antigen or protein, and your body recognizes that as foreign. And our immune system's job is to get rid of foreign objects, foreign viruses, foreign bacteria, foreign cells in the case of cancer, right? Our immune system's fighting cancer on a daily basis, getting rid of cells that it identifies as abnormal. So when we vaccinate, we expose you to a little bit of what is abnormal or foreign to the body. It primes the immune system to prepare to fight it. And you maintain a cellular immunity, and you maintain a humoral immunity, right? In your, I'm just gonna say in the liquid part of your immune system, for lack of a better terminology at the moment. But your body has immune memory, and so when it sees the infectious agent, then it already recognizes it is prepared to fight, and it can stop it before an infection is even taking place in the body. So in the case of the COVID-19 vaccines, the two vaccines that have emergency use authorization from the FDA are those messenger RNA or mRNA vaccines. And what that messenger RNA encodes for is the spike protein that is present on the coronavirus or the COVID-19 virus. And so what happens when we get these vaccines is our body sees that messenger RNA and it does what it's supposed to do in the cell. We have messenger RNA as well, and it's basically like a transcript for a protein. So our ribosomes, which are cellular machinery, transcribe that mRNA, and create little spike proteins. And those little spike proteins are recognized as by our immune system as foreign. And so our immune system mounts a response, and that's part of the side effects people get from the vaccine. And I'm sure we'll talk about that afterwards. So our body mounts an immune response to that spike protein. And by the way, the spike protein is how coronavirus enters into the cells of our respiratory tract. And it creates a memory of spike protein is foreign to us. And when we see it again, we're going to kick its butt. So in the studies, when they vaccinated participants and gave other participants a placebo, when they looked at who was infected, 95% of the time, the people who had serious infections due to COVID-19 were in that unvaccinated group. So it showed that the vaccine was efficacious, effective, working to prevent COVID-19 infections 95% of the time in the people who received the actual vaccination in comparison to people who received a placebo or just something inert that wasn't the study drug, which was the vaccine. So I hope that's complete.
And would you like to add anything there?
Right. And so when you're vaccinated, it's like loading antivirus software on your laptop. It works in the background. It blocks incoming viruses. Most of the time, you have no idea what's going on. It's right there in the background, protecting your computer from external threats. And so that's how our immune system works, just working in the background and blocking. And so sometimes you have to update your antivirus software, depends on the type, as new viruses come in. And this is why every year we get a flu shot, because there are different types of variants of the flu shot virus that come in. And for COVID vaccine, most of them need 2 shots. You get a prime, and then depending on the vaccine, 21 to 28 days later, you do an update, a software update, or so to speak. We don't know how long this immunity will last, because this is a new virus, it's a new vaccine. So we are monitoring going forward to see how long immunity is going to last. But we think, based on previous experience, that it should be pretty durable, but we don't know. So I think one of the things to remember, this is a new virus, and they're learning as we go along. And if anybody claims they have all the answers, they're lying. We don't. It's like driving at night. You can only see so far ahead. But eventually you get from San Francisco to Los Angeles, but you don't see the whole road at the same time. So it is with this new pandemic, it's a new disease. We don't know how it will end, but it's promising that now we have efficacious vaccines.
I like the way you put it. I really do like the way you put it. Thank you so much. We do have a question from Daphne Smith again. And anybody on Facebook, if you're watching, please do put up some questions that we can actually share with our physicians. So Daphne asks, do you know how this vaccine will affect those with cancer taking chemo and immunotherapy? Can you speak on side effects? Also, I read today that somebody died from the vaccine. I did see that in the paper as well. It was a doctor that actually passed away. So if you could both maybe touch on that question.
Sure. I can't comment on the report of the death because I've not seen that information. And I think we have to be very careful when we say someone died of the vaccine, because as a clinician, I can think of all sorts of scenarios that might explain what happened. And it may be that a person who happened to have had the vaccine died, and it could be true and unrelated. So I can't comment on that because I don't know the details. So I would be very hesitant to co-sign that someone died from the vaccine. As it relates to the adverse effects that we've seen with the vaccine, and I'll speak to the most serious one that we've seen sort of consistently reported, although in comparison to the number of people who've received the vaccine, it has been a very infrequent event. That is the anaphylaxis. So anaphylaxis is a severe allergic reaction where people can experience systemic symptoms, and it can affect their ability to breathe, their heart rate, their blood pressure. and it is a medical emergency. So to date, as far as I know, none of the individuals that were vaccinated and experienced anaphylaxis died from those anaphylactic events. They were all successfully treated, as far as I know. And the frequency of that is so so small in comparison to even the frequency of deaths from COVID-19 infection. So, you know, while the fact that people anaphylax is important because the vaccine will eventually get rolled out to the general population, and that is a serious side effect, so far the percentage of anaphylactic events where no one died is significantly less than the number of individuals who have died from COVID-19 infections. So I think we really have to keep that in mind. In terms of the first part of the question, how will the vaccine affect people who have cancer and are taking chemo and immunotherapy? When these drugs are studied, they are studied in relatively healthy populations. So no one who was undergoing chemotherapy or immunotherapy that I'm aware of received the vaccine as part of the clinical trial, and those aren't the typical patients included in clinical trials. That is also true for pregnant women. They're not typically included in clinical trials. So everything has to be a conversation with your primary care provider and your cancer provider about when you should receive the vaccine. Should you wait until you're done with chemo, because chemo and immunotherapy can suppress the immune system and may decrease the response that or effectiveness of the vaccine in that individual. And so that conversation may look more like it's important to vaccinate the people in the household so that they, in theory, decrease the risk of, you can't even say spreading the virus to the person who's undergoing treatment, because that's not the clinical outcome of these trials. They didn't explicitly study, does the vaccine prevent spread of COVID-19? They studied decreasing the risk of serious infection and death. So we can't ask for the trials to give us information that haven't been studied, but typically this wouldn't be a time that we would vaccinate people, with the exception of flu. We typically do give flu vaccines to those populations. So it has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. I wouldn't expect the side effects to be significantly different than those in the general population, or those people who were participating in the clinical trials. But again, there's different things at play. So you already have the cancer diagnosis and their symptoms related to that, which can include things like fatigue and etc. You have the chemotherapy or immunotherapy, and those have very significant side effects. And so if you add on top of that, and I'm just saying this theoretically, the vaccine and those side effects, the person may feel perhaps a little worse than the average person. For those of us who are on the survivor side of cancer, like myself, we consider a past medical history of cancer and a past history of, chemotherapy use and radiation use. You're considered a relatively immunocompromised person. You can receive the vaccine. And we consider that population to be at a slight increased risk for complications due to COVID. Not the same as if, you're actively taking chemotherapy because of the profound immunosuppression that you experience from chemotherapy and radiation therapy and immunotherapy sometimes. But you're not at the same playing field as a healthy person. So having a history of cancer makes you prone to clots. It's a pro-inflammatory state, and you live with those risk factors. So when it came to making the decision to get a COVID-19 vaccine for myself, I consider that I'm taking care of people with COVID every single day. And that some of my patients may have COVID, whether I know it or they know it, because they're coming in for other things. So my risk for exposure is high, which makes my risk for this infection high. And then if I get infected because of a cancer history and a risk for complications of inflammation like blood clots, I had chemo-induced cardiomyopathy, so heart damage as a result of my chemotherapy. We know that COVID-19 can give you heart attack, it can give you heart failure, it can give you abnormal heart rhythms. I don't want to take the chance to get COVID and see, am I going to be relatively asymptomatic or am I going to die? I'm going to protect myself because I fully understand my risk. And I think at the end of the day, none of us are here to say, you must get the vaccine. We're here to say, please do make an informed decision with your healthcare providers, and really have an understanding of what your individual risks are and how those risks compare to any of the risk or side effects associated with the vaccine. For me personally, I have far more to gain in getting vaccinated and dealing with the side effects, and we'll have a more detailed side effects conversation. I have more to gain, and in getting vaccinated. To me, the side effects were very acceptable compared to the risk and complications of getting a COVID-19 infection. And that's what we have to think about and seriously consider when we're having these conversations.
Andrew, if you could just add on, what would you say are the most common myths about COVID that physicians should dispel for patients?
Actually, that's one of the most common one, the side effects one that is disseminated. So I went for my annual wellness visit on Monday, and I was asking the nurse there whether she had been vaccinated, because I said I wanted to vaccinate because I want to travel internationally, and in protecting myself, I protect others. And if I could just divert. So we have a saying in Africa that a person is a person because of other people. So we live in community. If each of us got vaccinated, then we protect ourselves and also protect others in what we call herd immunity. So when the virus comes into our home, it cannot affect, because all of us are protected, it cannot spread. So one of the most common concerns is side effects. And what the clinical trials clearly found was that, at least for the Moderna vaccine and also for the Pfizer vaccine, when you look at both groups, the group that got the vaccine and the group that didn't, the rate of side effects, serious side effects, was actually the same, 1% in either group. And there's been a concern also about deaths, but you find that what people forget is that death is occurring all the time. There's a background, what we call a background rate of death. So people are dying even without the vaccine. And so when somebody dies having got the vaccine, as the doctor said very clearly, it may mean that they died of something else but happened to have the vaccine. Sometimes people die with something and not of something. So side effects are a big concern. So the nurse told me, well, I'm afraid of the side effects. And then I asked her which one, and she went blank, because side effects is this big mountain that we are so scared of. And when you ask, but which one? Is it the pain at the injection site? Is it the mild flu-like illness? Is it the headaches? Is it the joint pain that you may get? I remember talking to a lady, and I said, when you just get pregnant, you may feel a little off. Maybe nauseated, you may feel your appetite may... I've never been pregnant, so let me not pretend I know what it feels like. But your body is getting used to the baby that's developing in you, and eventually you stabilize. The morning sickness goes away and you're good. I've never met a lady who said, I don't want to get pregnant because of morning sickness. So it's a risk-benefit calculus. I have a baby, and there are also risks to having a delivery. Where I come from, mothers die in childbirth. But the joy of bringing forth a new life completely outweighs the inconveniences you may go through. The second very common myth is about the vaccine has a chip, a microchip. And this is a way of world domination and world control. I told you that in 1803, people were already concerned about the mark of the beast in the smallpox vaccine. So 2 centuries later, we still have the same suspicions. To me, it speaks to human nature, not exactly the vaccine, that we're always suspicious of new technologies. In 1973, credit cards were introduced, and people said this is a mark of the beast. And then in 74, And in the 70s, we had 1G telephones, we had ATMs, we got microwaves in the 1980s. We moved into the 1990s with, in the 2000s, the radio frequency, RFID chips. In 2019, we had 5G technology, and people keep saying it's 5G that is causing COVID, but we now know that that is not true. So it looks like for every new technology that comes, you associate it with the mark of the beast or the Antichrist, and how this is going to be used as a label. The third myth that I hear about a lot is vaccine passports, that people are going to be forced to be vaccinated before they're allowed to travel. And I remind them that we already get yellow fever vaccinations, and that's been going on for decades. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't have the mark of the beast on me because I have a yellow fever vaccine. The other concern or the myth is that the vaccine is going to change my DNA. And on a social media group I was on yesterday, somebody was joking to a classmate of mine who'd got his second dose, saying, well, you don't look like a monkey, you still look like the doctor we know, because of this concern about changing the DNA. What people don't realize is that the messenger RNA vaccines that Alexa talked about don't actually, they as she said, they teach the body how to respond to the virus when it comes using a protein that resembles a spike protein. The process in the cell does not involve the nucleus where the DNA is. It completely bypasses the nucleus. It happens in what we call the cytoplasm. So it is like if somebody comes to your home and only uses the bathroom and goes out, there's no way they're going to mess with your kitchen. They cannot alter your kitchen if all they're doing is using the basement or the restroom and leaving. So there's no way that the messenger RNA vaccines are going to change your DNA. And then there's another concern about the speed at which the vaccines are developed. They've been developed too fast. I don't trust the government that developed them. And this is understandable. Of course, vaccine development has traditionally taken a long time. But when you have a global pandemic with up to 4,000 deaths in the US now, you don't have time to go through the usual hoops. So the advantage is that the new technology now used to make these mRNA vaccines makes it possible that you can actually develop much faster. So on January 6th, the Chinese posted the genomic sequence online. It was taken to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in the lab, and they were able to give Moderna, the company that made one of the vaccines, instructions on how to make the messenger RNA vaccines. We also decided to change the way we analyze the data in real time, and so we're able to develop the vaccines, do phase 1-2 trials, accelerate to phase 3, and begin developing vaccines in real time before we knew that they would work, because we knew that we didn't have time to go through the usual processes. And that is why this has, in fact, it's a huge contribution, we should really applaud science for in 7 months, from January to when the vaccines rolled out, to identify a new virus which had never been seen before, develop vaccines and begin vaccinating people. That's never been done before, and this is a huge testament. I've already told people God works through medicine and science, and so it's not correct to mistrust medicine and science. When Jesus was on earth, he healed people by speaking to them, by touching them, by spitting on them, by rubbing mud in their ears, by telling them to go dip in a pool. So God works through various ways and different ways, and that includes medicine and vaccines. Thank you.
Amen. Oh, you're muted, Pastor Rhonda.
Thank you. And I think the best part of this conversation, even for everybody, want something that is consistent, is to make an informed decision with your own self's health professional. Because you can be talking to another doctor that is speaking in general, that has not seen your chart, does not know your additional background, what other health challenges you have. They're just giving you an answer, the best of their ability, based on what is in general. But, you could be suffering from something that no one has been talking about. So it's not on their radar, but your health professional has your records, your chart. They know your history, your family history, as much as you have been able to share with them. And so we're sharing information today to help you make informed decisions. But the best way is not to sit back with the family and friends, but to chime in with your own health professional and to make the decision that's best for you.
Thank you, Pastor Rhonda. If I could just jump in. The internet is not a medical school.
Amen.
There is so much information on the internet. And one of the challenges we've had with COVID is you have a pandemic of a virus and a pandemic of misinformation.
Yes.
And there is so much misinformation. And remember that information on the internet is driven by advertising revenue. We have learned that sensational stories sell. So if something is fake, it generates clicks, and clicks generate ad revenue. And the more you click, the more it spreads. So chicken wings are more likely to be eaten than broccoli. That is just human nature. And so there's lots of chicken wings that look juicy on the internet. But all I would say is eat your broccoli, eat your greens, eat your kale, because that's better for your body, speaking, so to speak. The second thing is I always tell people, the people telling you not to wear a face mask or not to wear the vaccine will not be there in the ICU when you're hooked up to a ventilator. You won't pay my medical bills.
That's right.
It will be me facing the virus by myself. So when somebody says something, I always ask, who is saying it? Why are they saying it?
That's right. There's a motive.
So many of the things you see on social media are never signed. It's my neighbor's uncle works in the hospital and you overheard Dr. So-and-so saying this. That is not a primary source. That is hearsay and that is rumor. So make sure that you're careful about whom you believe. And then the final thing I wanted to say was diseases do not read books.
Mm-hmm.
The SARS-CoV-2 virus does not read social media. The only thing that it cares about is whether you have protective antibodies in your body. It doesn't care about religious beliefs, your political affiliations. It doesn't care about anything. The only thing that it cares about is whether you're protected. Diseases do not read books, and they certainly do not read social media.
Oh,
Wow.
man, I can hang out with Dr. Andrew all day.
Me
Right?
too.
Right?
Oh, my gosh.
So before we conclude, I'm just going to speak as somebody who's just down the street minding my business. I'm staying home. I'm minding my business. I'm listening to the guidelines. I'm staying home. But again, because I'm immune compromised, my story is different. So I would like for you both to just summarize and help people understand what the next 6 months may look like or is going to look like for us, number one, and how we should conduct ourselves along within the next 6 months. And I'm sure it's going to be, I mean, for me, a lot of it is more of a mental thing, a mental understanding that I have to take care of myself emotionally, spiritually, physically. I'm settled in understanding what this disease is and what it has spoken for me. But as much as I have conversations with other people, they're not really taking this thing seriously. They really are not. And I'm finding that the conversations like this, I know will spread and help people understand what this disease is and what this year will look like. So if you don't mind, both of you just share with us what this year is going to look like and what we need to do for ourselves and for others to be able to move along and press on.
So I'll move backwards before I move forward. So in the start of the pandemic, when the news media kept repeating, people 65 and up are most susceptible to the infection, it sort of infuriated me for two reasons. One, even though the virus was more likely to kill people 65 and up, they failed to repeatedly mention that people of all ages, regardless of health, regardless of past medical history or lack thereof, could also die from this infection. And so people felt like the risk of this virus don't pertain to me, and I'm going to carry on the way that I I have been, and it resulted in millions of infection and thousands of lives lost every single day throughout this country and throughout the world. Um, so what people need to understand moving forward is being considered totally healthy, it does not mean that you have zero risk when it comes to this infection. We have seen infants, toddlers, children, teenagers, young adults, middle-aged adults, elderly people, both healthy and not, die from this infection, become critically ill, end up with catastrophic sequelae or complications of this infection. And, people don't really understand what it means to recover from this virus. Many people have not recovered back to their previous state of health. I have people who are disabled in their 20s and 30s, unable to work due to any number of symptoms. It could be profound fatigue and muscle aches and brain fog, on up to organ failure, like kidney failure, needing dialysis, liver failure, heart failure, heart arrhythmias, the complications of stroke, the complications of blood clots. And this all occurred in healthy people. So the best thing that we can do is to really take this pandemic seriously. We all need to wear our masks. We all need to wash our hands. We all need to avoid men. We all need to follow women. If you have not already, I have encouraged people since March, since we understood what happened in China, and we understood that things like high blood pressure and obesity and diabetes were risk factors. I've encouraged people to begin to take care of their bodies, have a modest weight loss, exercise, eat healthy, supplement where needed. If you're vitamin D deficient, you want to supplement, but you need to know your levels, and to just really take care of yourself, stay safe, and keep it at the forefront of your mind that at any point I can become infected with this virus and it could possibly kill me, and behave with that always on the forefront of your mind. We will not get out of this pandemic until we either achieve herd immunity and until we really take it seriously at the population level, because still the vast majority of the population is susceptible. And if we don't get things under control, this could honestly go on for years. The 1918 Spanish flu, the peak numbers of infections was 24 months, but they saw cases up to 54, 57 months out from the original outbreak of that pandemic. So we could have quite a long way to go if we don't take this seriously. And so I want people to remember that just because you have health on your side, just because you have youth on your side, or just because you've conjured it up in your mind that you think you could beat it, to think again and take it seriously, because there's no way that we are going to quickly get out of this pandemic if we don't sit down, isolate, for those of us who can, because there are many of us who can and choose not to, and if we don't really seriously consider taking the vaccine. It's a combination of all of those things.
Very well said. And to remember that even we have a pandemic, but we also have other diseases going on. We have,
Yes.
disease with poor nutrition, air pollution, as Dr. Lexa said, hypertension, diabetes, and all this is going on in the background. So let's not just get focused only on COVID. We need to address all these things at the same time.
Yes.
So that's very important. The second thing is to look at the rest of the world. There are countries which had much worse epidemics, but they've been controlled. And what is a common denominator in those countries is that everybody has taken it seriously, as Dr. Lexa has said. Because we're just one tree in a forest. And if only a few trees are protected and the rest of the forest is exposed, then we're not going to control the pandemic. Where I come from in Africa, we sometimes live in huts, a grass-thatched hut. And we have a saying that when a snake enters your hut, you do not ask it. You don't begin by asking how it got in or who sent it. Was it created in a lab? What color is it? What is it doing here? How did it get in? You kill the snake first, And then you figure out, how did it get in? Was there a hole in the wall? Was there food around? Was it looking for rats? What brought it? So we spent so much time asking how the snake got in, who sent it, what is this a plot to control women's fertility or world's population, and microchips and vaccines? And in the meantime, the snake is killing 3,000 of us every day. So let's focus on killing the snake. Because as you say in Africa, you can only measure a snake when it's dead.
Ooh. Wow, that's powerful.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank both of you, well, all of you, for taking your time out today to share with us, and to thank also the individuals who were working to post notes and ask questions to make this a very stimulating conversation. As I said before, I am Pastor Rhonda, founder of Celebrate Life Cancer Ministry. We are still providing support to the individuals diagnosed with cancer and those going through the cancer journey. And we invite you to reach out to us either on our website, which is www.celebratelifecm.org, or you can give us a call directly at 424-258-5433. If you're going through the journey now, or you know someone who is, we look forward to hearing from you so that we can serve you. And again, I thank all of us. We have Dr. Alexa from New York. We have Dr. Andrew, who is in Washington State and from Uganda. We have Olinka, who is a new care ambassador with Celebrate Life Cancer Ministry.
Wonderful.
And we are just excited to be here. And this was a great conversation. And again, please use this as an educational point to go and talk to your healthcare professional about you and your healthcare. Thank you so much.
Share the video with your families and friends.
Yes.
Yes. So until next time, bye now.
Bye-bye.